is also a low glycemic index food or a glycemic low food, which means it doesn't raise your blood sugars like bread or rice. Hi friends, I'm going to show you the number one superfood that I ate to beat diabetes. I actually had gestational diabetes, which increased my risk of getting full-blown diabetes within 5 years of that diagnosis. It's been well over 20 years, and not only did I normalize my hemoglobin A1C, I actually lost 30 pounds while I was pregnant, and I got back to my pre-pregnancy weight after each subsequent pregnancies, and I've kept it off for over a decade.
My sister had a baby a couple of years before I did, and she gained 60 pounds during her pregnancy, and I did not want to gain 60 pounds.
Now, I'm sure you know maintaining weight loss is much harder to do than losing the weight.
I starved myself for nearly 5 months and then wheeled out that wagon of fat that the internet will never let me forget. And after losing 67 pounds on a liquid diet, the next day, y'all, the very next day, I started to gain it back.
The thing is, when I changed my diet, not only did I lower my risk of diabetes by improving my insulin resistance, I reduced my risk for fatty liver, improved my energy level, my stamina, I elevated my HDL, I lowered my triglycerides, I lowered my blood pressure, I prevented colonic polyps, which prevents colon cancer, I cleared up my acne, my hives, and my eczema, and best of all, I saved a boatload of money on food bills. Actually, the best part of my journey is that I've never had to use diabetes, blood pressure, cholesterol, or weight loss medications. Now, I'm sure you're wondering what that superfood is. Well, here it is. It's the bean. But I didn't just eat any bean. Although any bean probably would have helped lower my blood sugars, my weight, my fatty liver, and blood pressure. The reality is, if you don't like your food, and I really didn't like most beans, it's really not going to work for you because you're not going to eat it. So not only did I dislike the taste of most beans, I also didn't like how they made me feel, bloated. Now, if you go to your local supermarket, you'll easily find several kinds of beans. Here I have black beans and I have pinto beans. They're very common. And now I eat just about all these daily. Now, whether it's pinto beans, black beans, or garbanzo beans, or my green beans called mung beans, or my soybeans, or my azuki beans, they all are wonderful. They all taste different. And they don't take me forever to cook because now I got myself an Instapot, which I didn't discover at that time. But on busy days, I have no problem eating canned beans because as a busy pregnant medical doctor, there was no way I'm going to cook beans. I barely slept. I worked long hours, and while away, I wasn't so perky pregnant. I was basically just trying to survive and not barf. And if you've ever been pregnant, you know what I'm talking about. So the food that I could swallow had to be a good source of nutrients, good source of protein, since I didn't have much of an appetite, but I also didn't have all day to cook. So I turned to my childhood favorite high protein food, tofu. This is a block of tofu that I froze. These are pressed tofu. Now, when you freeze it, it keeps longer, but also you change the texture because when you defrost it, a lot of the water would come out so that it comes out to be a drier, more meaty-like texture. But when you go to the store, you're not going to just find these pressed tofu blocks, but you also find silken, soft, medium, and firm tofu blocks. Then they have tofu noodles, which I love, tofu pudding, which is so soft and creamy, and of course, pressed tofu, like what I have, so that you don't have to spend all day pressing it. There's also stinky tofu, tofu skin, tofu jerky, deep fried tofu, snacking tofu, shredded tofu, tofu pouches, smoked tofu. Really, the options are endless if you find a good local Asian supermarket. And I'm just describing the amount of tofu that I find in one market near my home. But in Asia, tofu tastes so much better. Traditional Asians living in certain Asian countries, they've been able to still be the longest living people in the world, and they eat about 9 to 12 grams of soy-based products daily. Now, this is not soy extract or soy lecithin or soy protein in a can. This is actually eating real soy foods. And I find it interesting that Hawaii still holds the record for the longest lived state in the United States. The traditional Hawaiian diet is high carbohydrate and low in fat, which was used in this interventional study to improve weight loss, lipids, blood sugar, and blood pressure. They fed the study participants an unlimited amount of carbohydrate-rich, mostly whole foods. Notice the tofu in their diet. But their animal protein, including fish, chicken, it was limited to only 8 ounces a week, which is half a pound or equal to 2 quarter-pound burger patties at McDonald's. Now, this pretty much summarizes part of what I eat weekly, minus the brown rice, the pasta, the whole wheat bread, taro, and poi. Now, I have to remember to get some taro next time. Now, you may be on a low estrogen diet and be avoiding tofu. Well, I have good news for you. There's no estrogen in tofu, but there's estrogen in chicken, beef, and dairy, which isn't just a problem from eating those animals. Now, even if you don't eat meat, the estrogen in these animals, they're secreted in their waste, in their pee, in their poop, and they ultimately contaminate soil and water reservoirs, which you may live near. Now, tofu does have phytoestrogens, and I actually purposely seek to eat them. One of them is called genistein. Not only has it been shown to be protective against estrogen-thriving tumors, but they have also been shown to be protective against diabetes and obesity. And more importantly, it's been associated with longevity. Just look at the long-lived cultures. Now, I can't help that I was born into a long-lived culture. But unfortunately, just being born into a long-lived culture doesn't give you any perks if you live in a Western country and then you eat their Western diet. This is because your food quality, it rapidly changes your gut microbes. And if you think about it, those buggers, they multiply every 15 minutes. And that's why when you show up late to a picnic, you may want to skip that fried rice, that deli or egg salad, or anything with mayonnaise if you want to avoid food poisoning. Now, if you're on the fence about eating soy, let me share with you some well-published data on phytoestrogens. There are 3 types of dietary phytoestrogens. Number 1 are isoflavones, found highest in soy, but they're in other beans like chickpeas and to a lesser amount in other legumes like peanuts. Now, number 2, lignans are found abundantly in flax seeds, pecans, and walnuts. Number 3, lignans are found in cinnamon. It's called coumarin. That's really just found in cassia cinnamon, the fake kind. And I actually try to minimize the fake kind because it's actually a known liver toxin, even though it lowers your blood sugars. However, I'm trying to get more of the first and second type of lignans like isoflavones and soy products. But you know, garbanzo beans, they don't really taste like soy if you've ever tried either one of them. I grew up eating tons of tofu, so I love this texture. And tofu can be manipulated to all different types of textures. But I had to train myself to eat this texture of beans because I didn't grow up with chickpeas. If I want something softer, there's a soft or silken tofu for that. If I want something firmer, this is a pressed tofu, but there's actually much harder tofu like tofu skin. So I had to find a low carb substitute for rice because I just love that texture. And being busy, I didn't have time to go play with different grains. So what I did was I just took a block of tofu, like firm tofu, and I used it as my white rice. And in general, tofu is actually rich in both isoflavones and other beneficial lignans. And studies have shown that people who eat more phytoestrogen-rich foods like tofu improve their blood pressure, their weight, their insulin resistance, and their lipid profile. They also reduce pro-inflammatory cytokines. And most importantly, they seem to live longer and healthier. And as I age, my definition of what qualifies as living longer, it keeps changing. Now, the longest study following people is from Harvard, in which John F. Kennedy was actually one of the original participants. Now, this study has found all sorts of connection with longevity, including gratitude and joy, and strong, healthy connections with people, especially supportive spouses. So if you remember nothing from this video, remember to give someone a call or a hug today and thank them for being there for you. Do this every day in the week, and you'll find that by the end of the week, you will be a much more joyful person. Now, isoflavones is a group of plant nutrients that include diazin, genistein, and glycine. They are all beneficial to reduce mortality, and they are found in real food. They do have weak estrogenic activity, and they regulate the expression of estrogen receptors. Now, there are 2 kinds of estrogen receptors, alpha estrogen receptors and beta estrogen receptors. Now, breast tissue that has an abundance of alpha estrogen receptors that you don't want to stimulate. So this is why I avoid mammalian food, basically meats, because I don't want their estrogen to stimulate my breast tissue to grow, right? Mammalian estrogen, whether it's in your pork or beef, it's going to stimulate alpha estrogen receptors like your own estrogen. And we know this because literally Premarin was made from the pee of horses. Now, the second kind of estrogen receptors, the beta receptors, they're found all over your body, including your blood vessels. And activation of these receptors can change how fast your lipid oxidizes and turns rancid in your body, how high your inflammation will be in the form of cytokines, and how well your DNA can repair. And like everything in life, there's a balance. Your own body's estrogen binds to both the alpha and beta receptors. And this is why estrogen affects your entire body. However, plant isoflavones, they prefer to bind the beta receptors, which are in abundance in the coronary blood vessels, also known as the blood vessels around your heart. And when they bind to these receptors, they actually change how leaky your blood vessels are. And they change the amount of nitric oxide that you can produce to dilate or relax your blood vessels, which collectively reduces your oxidative stress and inflammation. And in other words, it opens up your blood vessels so you have more blood flow to your heart. And this is why phytoestrogens can be protective for your body. And I've mentioned in other videos, blood flow is the key to longevity. Well, think about what high blood sugar changes. It changes your blood flow. The better your blood flows, the healthier your body will be. Now, there are several ways to measure blood flow at home. Number one is free. You can do it to yourself right now. Take a look at the color of your toenail. Squeeze your big toenail until it turns white. And when you let go, your toenail should turn pink again within a few seconds. And if it doesn't, you should see a medical doctor. Now, if you look down and you have an opaque, thickened toenail, then you should also see a medical doctor. That could be a fungal toenail infection, which is also a sign of poor blood flow. The second thing you can do is feel the pulse at the top of your foot, called the dorsalis pedis pulse. And this pulse should feel as strong as a pulse in your wrist. If you can't find it, or if it is faint, check with your medical doctor. That could also be a sign of poor blood flow. Now, the third way to measure your blood flow is an indirect measurement, and that is from your blood pressure. In fact, having a normal blood pressure, even if you have to do it with medication, has been shown to lower the risk of all those diseases that I named.
Lowering blood pressure in these people could dramatically reduce their risk for heart disease. He told me he was scared to death when these results came out because he thought he would be attacked from both sides. He'd be attacked by people who said, "We knew all along that blood pressure lowering would reduce risk for heart disease. How could you do a clinical trial that put people on placebo? Half the people in the trial were put on placebo, fake medication, not real medicine."
Not necessarily true for lower blood sugars. So when I eat, I target foods that optimizes my blood flow to help open up my blood vessels, to improve that nitric oxide. And I minimize foods that actually constrict my blood vessels to increase my inflammation. And those are basically animal products. This is also why premenopausal women have an estrogen advantage and have less cardiovascular disease as compared to men or postmenopausal women. And this is why for postmenopausal women, it's actually beneficial to target foods high in phytoestrogens because it can help reduce those nagging, uncomfortable symptoms of hot flashes and sweating regulated by blood vessel dilation because of the lack of estrogen. But eating soybeans have been shown to have even more benefits beyond blood flow. Tofu is a high protein food. And when you eat foods higher in protein, you tend to feel more satiated. And when you are full, you simply just eat less food. Tofu is also a low glycemic index food or glycemic low food, which means it doesn't raise your blood sugars like bread or rice. And in fact, it's been shown that beans in general, they even have a second meal effect, whether it's tofu, black beans, or garbanzo beans. It actually works in the meal after the meal you ate the beans to continue to lower your blood sugar. And when you lower your blood sugar, you have lower insulin levels, which translates into less storage of fat. You actually need insulin to gain weight. So if you can keep your insulin low, you can actually lose weight. And there's many diets that work on this principle. But health is more than just achieving a lower blood sugar or losing weight. Because if you lower your blood sugar wrong or lose weight the wrong way, you not only risk getting more insulin resistant, you can also shorten your longevity.
The paleo diet, I think, sounds very intuitive. It's like, oh my God, we evolved a long time ago eating different foods. Shouldn't we go back to that way of life? So those of you not familiar with it, I think the three basic tenets of this are no dairy, because there were no dairy herders in those days, no grains, because we hadn't had the green revolution, and no beans, which is the oddest one for me, because beans have got to be about the healthiest thing out there. And so we're talking about soybeans and kidney beans and refried beans and things like that. The reason people tend to lose weight on diets like these is because they're restrictive. If you wiped out all the dairy, all the grains, and all the beans, there's much fewer things to eat. And if there's fewer things to eat, then the palatability of the foods you can still eat kind of runs out. And you would be hungry if you could have something else, but you're not hungry for what's acceptable. I'm just thinking of missing all the nutrients in the grains and beans. So grains and beans across the planet are staples. They're inexpensively stored. They have fabulous shelf life. And so I have a problem with cutting those out. And I do think long term, there could be potential harm. So I'm not a proponent of the paleo diet. In fact, American Heart Association just came out with a diet patterns paper you might have seen in the news in the last couple of months, and we gave thumbs down to paleo and keto.
Now, insulin resistance is when you can't tolerate carbohydrates. And when you become more insulin resistant, when you eat carbohydrates, you have worsening blood sugar levels. And ultimately, that cascade makes you gain weight and compromise your blood flow. But that's not all. Have you ever heard of the saying, all I need to know is what I learned in kindergarten? I think the most important thing that you can learn in life is to just be nice and to share. And this is true when it comes to food. Now think about how many get-togethers you've had in which you guys brought food to share. Sharing is super important, and it's a great act for longevity. It's not just sharing with other people. It's actually more important to share with your own gut microbiome, your gut friends. And when you eat, you're not just feeding you. Your food interacts with your gut microbiome, which will digest whatever you eat. And bacteria, they grow every 15 minutes. So this is why people get food poisoning. And it's also how you can change your gut microbiome and your metabolism. The same concept in growing bacteria in food is happening in your body right now. I mean, you're basically a giant incubator. Even when you're not pregnant, you're incubating trillions of microbes, and you have the power to incubate friends or to incubate foes. Now, friendly microbes, they ferment good carbohydrates called fiber, and they convert the fiber into anti-inflammatory molecules that shut off inflammation. And they can also ferment your phytoestrogens into biologically active, more beneficial compounds, such as Enterolignans, that are beneficial for you to stay healthy longer. But if you don't eat phytoestrogens, you can't make things out of thin air. It's not magical. And this is why when you eat foods, you always should have some leftovers, and you should always eat diversity, because this will help nourish good gut microbes that in turn give you health benefits. Now, if you want to be good to your gut microbes, buy organic when you can, and eat the plants whole and minimally processed. Don't eat stuff pulverized to a powder, and make sure you eat a diversity of them every day. And if you want to learn more about how phytoestrogens affect breast tissue, watch the next video.